"Daddy, are we gonna have dinner tonight?" Owen asked, his big brown eyes blinking up at Will as they stood beside the beat-up pickup truck with a busted tail light. Will Dawson crouched down and zipped up his 7-year-old son's coat, hiding the knot in his throat with a tight smile. "Of course we are, bud. You and me, remember? I just gotta paint a room real quick, then we'll go get your favorite pizza." Owen grinned and nodded, clutching his action figure in one hand, the other holding Will's calloused fingers. Will's stomach tightened. He had $24 in his wallet. If this job didn't pay today, they were screwed. The house in front of them was nothing like the usual gigs. It was massive white stone, black windows, long driveway winding through trimmed hedges. It looked like it belonged on TV. Will double-check the address handwritten on the paper. This was it. "All right, stay close," he told Owen as they walked up the steps. The door opened before he could knock. A woman stood there in workout leggings and a soft gray sweater, her blonde hair in a loose braid, no makeup, but glowing. She looked maybe late 20s, early 30s, and way too pretty to be real. "You're here to paint the nursery?" she asked. Will cleared his throat. Yeah, Will Dawson, this is my son Owen. I hope it's all right he tags along, he's quiet. I couldn't find a sitter today." Her gaze flicked down to Owen, and something softened in her face. "Hi, Owen," she said warmly, kneeling. "I'm Kiera. What's your favorite color?" "Red," he said instantly. "Good choice." She stood and smiled at Will. "It's fine. I don't mind, come in." The house was warm, smelled like vanilla, and something expensive Will couldn't name. Owen slipped off his shoes and wandered to the big glass windows, staring at the pool outside. Will followed her down a hallway, toward a room at the end. "I just need this one painted pale green. The furniture's coming next week. I'm adopting," she said casually, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb. "Oh," Will said, surprised. That's really great." She nodded, pulling the door open. "Figured I'd get the room ready first. Do you need anything else from me?" "No, I'm good. Should take a few hours," he said, pulling his tools out of the canvas bag. "I'll be in the kitchen. Owen can hang out there if he wants. I've got snacks and hot chocolate." Will looked up at her hesitant. "You sure? I don't want him bothering you." "He won't," she said with a small smile. "I like kids." Will nodded, heart thudding. He had no idea who she was, and yet his gut told him she wasn't just anyone. 2 hours in, Will was halfway through the second coat when he heard Owen laughing from the kitchen. He peeked out, wiping sweat from his brow. Owen sat at the kitchen island, swinging his legs while Kiera helped him stack mini marshmallows into a tower. Her head was tilted back, laughing at something he said. She looked happy. Genuinely. Will stepped back inside the nursery, grabbing his roller again. No way was he getting distracted by a woman who lived in a house like this. She was probably dating some Wall Street guy who wore loafers and had perfect teeth. Still, when she came in later with a glass of water, he felt his chest tighten. "You're great with him," she said, handing him the glass. Will nodded. "He's a good kid." Kiera leaned against the doorframe. "You do this full time?" "Painting, yes. Take whatever I can get. It's been a rough year." She didn't ask for details, didn't pity him, just nodded like she understood. He hesitated, then added, "His mom left when he was 4, took off to California. We haven't heard from her since." Kiera's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "We manage." She watched him for a second. "You know, I could use someone to repaint the guest room too, if you're available this week." Will blinked. Yes, I'm available." "Good," she said, then turned to the door. "Dinner's almost ready. You're both staying." He frowned. "Oh no, I can't." She looked back. "It's just pasta. I made too much, please." Owen already picked out a plate. He likes the ones with dinosaurs. Will exhaled. His son hadn't had a proper meal in 2 days. All right, thank you. The dining room was absurd. Crystal chandelier, long marble table, velvet chairs. But Kiera had set 3 plates at one end, with mismatched napkins and a bowl of spaghetti in the middle like they were any family in any kitchen. Owen talked nonstop during dinner, and Kiera listened like everything he said was gold. Will watched her, confused and grateful and a little bit stunned. After dessert ice cream with rainbow sprinkles, she walked them to the door. Same time tomorrow, she asked. Yes, I'll be here. She smiled again, and this time it lingered. As Will buckled Owen into his booster seat, the boy looked up at him. Dad. Yeah. Is she a princess? Will chuckled, something like that. By day 3, Will had painted 2 rooms, fixed a broken drawer, and helped Kiera rearrange a bookshelf. She'd made lunch, then asked if he could help carry something from the garage. That turned into coffee on the back patio while Owen ran around with her dog, a golden retriever named Cooper. So, what do you actually do? He asked finally, unable to hold his curiosity anymore. I mean, this house. Kiera sipped her drink. I run a company, tech stuff. I started it when I was 21, sold part of it last year. She glanced at him. I'm not trying to impress you, I just hate lying. Will blinked. You're a millionaire. She shrugged. Yeah. He laughed under his breath. Well, that explains the chandelier in the bathroom. Kiera grinned. It was a gift. He looked at her, really looked at her. You don't act like someone with that kind of money. I don't like people knowing, she said quietly. Usually they treat me different. Will shook his head. You're just Kiera to me. She looked away, smiling. That night, Will lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of the small apartment he shared with Owen. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she smiled when Owen made a joke, how her laugh echoed down the hall, how she looked at him like she saw more than paint-stained clothes and a tired single dad. He didn't know what this was or where it was going. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just painting a room anymore, he was falling, hard. It started raining the next morning, steady and cold, the kind of downpour that made the inside of Will's truck feel like a rusting tin can. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Owen, who was humming quietly to himself, tracing patterns on the fogged-up glass with his fingertip. I packed your coloring books, Will said, flicking on the wipers. And the markers. Just try not to get any on the ladies' counters, all right. Owen nodded, still preoccupied with his window art. When they pulled into the long drive, Will noticed the black SUV parked in front of the garage. It wasn't there yesterday. The engine was still warm, faint steam rising in the rain from the hood. Someone else was here. He jogged around to Owen's side and lifted him out, tucking the boy's jacket hood over his head before they both dashed up the steps. The front door opened before he could knock, not by Kiera this time, but by an older man in a navy suit with silver hair and a face that had probably never smiled. Will hesitated. Hi, I'm here to finish the guest room. The man looked him over like he was dirt on imported tile. You're the contractor. Before Will could answer, Kiera appeared behind him, tying her hair up. He's the one I hired, yes. She stepped around the man like she wasn't even aware of his disapproval. Morning, Will. Come on in. Owen, I made waffles. Will followed, his boots squeaking against the polished floor. Didn't mean to interrupt anything. You didn't, Kiera said, leading them toward the kitchen. That's my uncle. He drops in sometimes to remind me I'm not living my life the way he thinks I should. Will raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? She laughed under her breath. Only if you plan to run for public office. In the kitchen, Owen was already perched on a stool, syrup dripping down his chin. Kiera handed Will a coffee before he could even ask. Her uncle lingered in the doorway, arms crossed. watching like he was waiting for someone to slip. "So this is what you've decided to do with your time now," he said, voice edged with condescension. Kiera didn't look at him. "I'm preparing for something important, not that it's your concern." The man's gaze shifted to Will. "And I assume you're what, a friend?" he asked, tone suggesting the word didn't belong to people who wore boots indoors. Will straightened. "Just here for the painting, sir." His uncle gave a tight nod and turned away without another word. When he was gone, Kiera rubbed her temples. "Sorry, he thinks money means he gets to micromanage everyone's life." Will leaned on the counter. "He doesn't seem to like me." "Good," she said simply, then looked up. "I like you just fine." Will froze. The words were casual, but her eyes weren't. He didn't know what to do with the way she was looking at him, like she saw more than he wanted her to. He cleared his throat. "I should get started upstairs." Kiera nodded, but something lingered between them as he left the room. Not flirtation exactly. More like recognition, a silent understanding that whatever they were doing here, it wasn't just about paint anymore. By noon, the rain had turned into a light drizzle. Will opened the guest room windows to air out the fumes and heard laughter from the yard. He leaned out slightly. Kiera was outside in a hoodie and leggings, dancing barefoot on the wet patio stones with Owen. The dog bounded in circles around them, barking happily. Owen was giggling, arms outstretched, spinning like he didn't have a care in the world. Will watched, heart tight. He hadn't seen his son that carefree in months. When they came back inside, soaked and breathless, Kiera caught Will's eye. "I think your son might be a better dancer than me." "He gets it from his mom," Will said before he could stop himself, then regretted it. Kiera didn't pry. Instead, she handed Owen a towel and turned to Will. "Do you always do everything yourself?" He wiped his hands on a rag. "What do you mean?" "Raising him, working, keeping it together." Will shrugged. "No one else is going to do it for me." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You ever think about doing something bigger?" Will frowned. "Like what?" "I don't know," she said slowly. "Starting your own business. Something that gives you more control over your time. Maybe something that doesn't leave you exhausted every night." He blinked. "I barely pay rent as it is." "I could help," she said, then quickly added, "Not like charity. As an investment, you're good at what you do. You just need someone to believe in it." Will stared at her. "Why would you do that?" She looked away, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Because I know what it's like to feel stuck, and I remember what it meant when someone believed in me." He wasn't sure what to say to that. No one had ever offered him anything without expecting something in return. Before he could respond, a timer dinged from the kitchen. "Lunch," Kiera said. "Grilled cheese and tomato soup, unless you're allergic to comfort food." Will chuckled, the tension in his chest easing just enough to breathe again. After lunch, Owen curled up on the couch with a blanket and fell asleep mid-sentence. Kiera covered him gently, then joined Will in the hallway. "I'm taking him to the aquarium on Saturday," she said. "That big one downtown, you two should come." Will hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said, cutting him off softly. "It's not about obligation. It's about spending time with people who make me feel grounded." He glanced down the hall, where his son was snoring softly. "All right," he said finally. "We'll be there." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. As he packed up his tools for the day, Will couldn't shake the strange, unfamiliar feeling rising in his chest. Hope. Not the kind that flickered and faded. The kind that stayed, warm and stubborn, even in the rain. The aquarium glowed with deep blues and moving shadows, casting ocean-colored light across the high ceilings and polished floors. Massive tanks stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with slow-moving stingrays, swirling schools of silver fish, and the occasional shark gliding silently past. Will walked a few steps behind Owen, who pressed both palms to the glass of the jellyfish exhibit, his breath fogging the surface. Kiera stood beside the boy, crouched low, pointing out the different colors as they pulsed and shimmered. "I didn't know they came in purple," Owen whispered, eyes wide. "They glow under ultraviolet light," Kiera said. "It helps them survive in the dark." Will leaned on the railing, watching them. Kiera wore a soft navy coat and ankle boots, her hair pulled up in a loose knot that let a few pieces fall around her face. For someone who probably spent half her life in boardrooms, she looked completely at ease crouched beside a kid in front of a jellyfish tank. She stood and turned to Will. "There's a touch pool upstairs, want to check it out?" He nodded, and they followed Owen up the winding staircase, where shallow basins filled with small sea creatures stretched along the walls. A staff member handed Owen a laminated card with pictures and names. "Can I touch the starfish?" he asked, already rolling up his sleeves. Kiera grinned, "Only with 2 fingers, like this." Will watched her guide his son's hand into the water with patience and ease. He wasn't used to people folding into their life like it was natural. But Kiera didn't try too hard. She didn't ask questions that felt like traps or pretend she knew what it was like to raise a kid alone. She just helped Owen find the sea cucumber and read the facts aloud like it was the most important thing in the world. Later, as they sat on a bench near the penguin enclosure, Will handed Owen a soft pretzel and glanced at Kiera. "You're good with him." She shrugged, brushing a flake of salt off her coat. "I spent a lot of time alone when I was a kid. Books, museums, animals. I guess I just remember what I needed back then." Will tilted his head. "No siblings." "Only child. My parents were more invested in their quarterly dividends than bedtime stories." Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter of fact. "They split when I was 16. I stayed with my uncle for a while. He thought structure was the answer to everything." Will rested his arms on his knees. "Sounds like a tough house to grow up in." "I learned how to be self-sufficient," she said. "But sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to have someone who always showed up, who didn't treat love like a transaction." Will looked over at Owen, who was now feeding bits of pretzel to a seagull with absolute concentration. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, quietly, "That's what I want for him, to know someone's always in his corner." "You're doing that," she said. He met her eyes. "I'm trying." The air between them shifted, quieter but charged. Not romantic yet, something deeper, something forming beneath the surface. As they left the aquarium, Owen fast asleep in Will's arms, Kiera walked beside him, silent until they reached the truck. "Do you have plans tomorrow?" she asked as he buckled Owen into the seat. Will straightened, brushing his hands on his jeans. "Just a drywall repair at a condo across town. Why?" "I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow night," she said. "Nothing formal, just a few people from the board. I've already told them I'm bringing someone. Would you," she hesitated, then added, "would you come with me?" Will blinked. "You want me there?" "I trust you," she said simply. "And I think it'd be easier with someone real in the room." He studied her for a moment. "What should I wear?" She smiled. "I've got that covered." The next evening, Will stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of the tailored black button-down that had appeared at his door earlier that afternoon with a handwritten note from Kiera. "Just wear this. You'll look great." He didn't own anything this nice. The fabric was smooth, the fit perfect. He'd never had clothes that felt like they were made for him. Owen, staying with their upstairs neighbor for the evening, had clapped when he saw it. "You look like you're in a movie." Will laughed at the memory as he stepped out into the hallway of her house, where Kiera waited, dressed in a sleek midnight blue dress that didn't sparkle or shine, but somehow still stole his breath. "You clean up well," she said, her voice low. "So do you," he answered, unable to look away. Inside, the dining room had been transformed. Candles flickered along the long table. Wine glasses shimmered beneath the chandelier. The guests were already arriving: 3 men in suits, 2 women in heels and sharp smiles. Kiera introduced Will without hesitation. "This is Will Dawson." Someone asked, "And what do you do, Mr. Dawson?" "I renovate homes," Will said easily. "Paint, repair, whatever needs doing." There was a pause. Then one of the women smiled politely and turned back to her wine. Kiera slipped her hand through Will's arm, leaned close. "You're doing fine," she whispered. Dinner passed in a blur of clinking silverware and muted conversation about market shares and quarterly projections. Will didn't pretend to know everything, but he listened. When someone asked his opinion on a new housing development outside the city, he gave it honestly. Kiera's eyes flicked to his, impressed. After dessert, she led him outside to the patio to breathe. "Thanks," she said, leaning on the railing, "for showing up. I needed someone I didn't have to perform for." Will looked at her, the soft light catching the curve of her cheek. "I don't think you perform for anyone." "You'd be surprised," she said, then glanced down. "I'm used to people wanting pieces of me. Access. Leverage. You're the first one who hasn't asked for anything." He swallowed hard. "That's not why I'm here." "I know." There was a silence, but it didn't feel empty. "I think about you," she said suddenly. Will turned toward her, heart thudding. "Yes." She looked up. "When you're not here, I wonder what you're doing, what Owen's reading, whether you're okay." "I think about you too," he admitted. She stepped closer, their hands brushing on the railing. "Can I kiss you?" she asked. He didn't answer, he just closed the space between them. The kiss was slow, careful, like neither of them wanted to break the moment. When they finally pulled apart, Will rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't see any of this coming," he murmured. "Me neither," she whispered. But neither of them moved. "Not yet." Will stood on the sidewalk outside Kiera's house, staring at the cardboard box in his hands. Inside were a handful of small tools, a folded cloth, and the last invoice he'd written in pen that morning. He'd finished the final room, her office, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't have a reason to come back. The front door opened before he knocked. "I heard your truck," Kiera said, stepping outside. Her arms were crossed, but not cold. She wasn't wearing shoes, just socks against the stone steps. "You weren't going to come in." "I didn't want to interrupt," he said, adjusting the box in his grip. She tilted her head. "You've never knocked before." "I figured things might be different now." "They are." He waited, unsure what that meant. She stepped back. "You can come in, or you can stand out here pretending we're strangers again. Your call." Inside, the house felt warmer than usual, but not because of the heat. The lights were dimmer, the curtains drawn, and a faint trace of something savory carried from the kitchen. He followed her without a word. Owen was sitting at the table, a glass of milk in front of him, flipping through a science book. A woman around 60 sat beside him, reading along. She looked up and gave Will a warm nod. "That's Evelyn," Kiera said. "She's helping me with some things this week." Will blinked. "You hired a tutor." "She's more than that. She helped raise me. She's the one who taught me how to make paper airplanes and how to curse in Italian, so fair warning." Evelyn chuckled. "He's got good instincts, this one," she said. "Didn't even flinch when I told him Pluto's not a planet anymore." Will smiled faintly, then turned to Kiera. "I didn't know you were planning to bring someone in." "I wasn't, until this morning," she said. "I realized I wanted help from someone who knew what it meant to care without a timeline." He nodded, setting the box on a nearby chair. Kiera gestured to the living room. "Can we talk?" They sat on opposite ends of the couch. She pulled one leg underneath her and waited until the silence settled. "I've been thinking about what you said," she started. "About showing up, about giving someone consistency." Will leaned forward, arms resting on his knees. "Yeah. I've spent most of my life building something I thought would make me feel safe. Money, control, a house with all the right furniture. But it turns out none of that means anything if I come home and feel like a guest in my own life." He didn't speak, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "I want something different now," she said. "Not because it's broken, but because I finally see what it's supposed to look like. I'm not sure it can give you anything more than what I already have," Will said. "I've got Owen, a truck that rattles above 40, and a spreadsheet in my glove box that keeps pretending we're not broke." "I didn't ask you for more," she said. "I just asked you to come to dinner." Will smiled, but it was quiet. "Is that what this is?" She stood suddenly and walked toward the kitchen. "You'll find out." When he followed, the table had been reset. The dishes were different ceramic with hand-painted rims, and a single candle stood in the center next to a bowl of roasted vegetables and a plate of seared chicken. Owen was already seated, eyes wide at the spread. "You didn't have to do all this," Will said. "I wanted to," Kiera replied, "because I think we deserve a seat at the table, all three of us." Evelyn slipped past them with a knowing smile. "I'll be in the guest room if you need anything. Don't burn the sauce." Will sat, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was taking up space he hadn't earned. Halfway through the meal, Owen looked up from his plate. "If you're adopting a baby, does that mean you're going to be a mom?" Kiera paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "I hope so." He considered this. "Can you be my mom too?" Will froze. Kiera set her fork down gently. "That's not something I can decide by myself," she said, her voice steady. "But care about you a lot, Owen, and care about your dad too, so maybe we figure out what that looks like together. Is that okay?" Owen nodded. "Okay." Will exhaled, heart thudding in his chest. Later, after the dishes were cleared and Owen had fallen asleep watching a nature documentary, Will stepped out onto the back patio. Kiera joined him a moment later, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I didn't expect that," he said. "I didn't either, but I'm glad he asked." Will turned toward her. "You meant it." "Every word." He took her hand without asking. "You know this isn't going to be perfect, right?" "I don't want perfect," she said. "I just want real." He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. "Then real is what I'll give you." She didn't answer with words. She kissed him, slow and certain, like she'd stopped doubting what came next. Weeks passed. Will's business started to shift, not overnight, but steadily. Kiera helped him build a website. Evelyn watched Owen when he needed to take on longer projects, and slowly, requests started coming in from neighborhoods he'd never worked in before. One afternoon, Kiera handed him an envelope. "Open it." Inside was a letter of incorporation. Dawson Contracting, LLC. It was real, official, stamped and signed. "You did this?" he asked, stunned. "You earned this," she replied. "I just paid the fee." He pulled her into his arms, kissed the top of her head. "Remind me to stop underestimating you." "Only if you stop underestimating yourself." The next spring, they stood together under a white canopy in the backyard of the very house he'd first painted. Owen wore a small navy suit, Kiera a sleeveless cream dress that whispered in the breeze. There were no vows read aloud, no efficient. Just a quiet, private moment they shared with only Evelyn, Owen, and the soft sound of wind chimes in the distance. "I never thought I'd have this," Will said as they danced on the grass, barefoot. "And I never thought I'd want it," Kiera whispered. "But you do." She looked up. "With you, always." From painter to partner, From survival to something like joy, he'd only come to fix a wall. Instead, he'd found a home. The morning sun filtered through soft linen curtains as Will carefully zipped up Owen's backpack. A permission slip for the Nature Center field trip was tucked inside, along with a peanut butter sandwich shaped like a dinosaur, because Kiera had insisted things should be fun even on regular days. From the kitchen, the sound of slicing vegetables drifted in, followed by the murmur of Kiera's voice as she chatted with Evelyn, who was prepping ingredients for the community dinner Kiera had volunteered them all for. It had been her idea, a neighborhood gathering in the park. "Everyone deserves to feel like they belong somewhere," she'd said. Will smiled faintly as he fastened Owen's jacket. It was still strange sometimes how full life had become. Not chaotic, just rich in a way that used to feel impossible. "Dad, where's my eagle feather?" Owen asked, bouncing on his toes. "The one I got at the museum." "I think it's in your treasure box," Will replied. "Did you want to show it to your class?" Owen nodded. "Miss Tracy said we can bring something special to share. She said it can't be a pet, though." Will knelt and kissed his forehead. "I'll go check your box." He found it quickly, tucked between a paper airplane and a rock shaped vaguely like a heart. As he handed it over, Kiera stepped into the room. "You have paint on your wrist," she said lightly, glancing at the faded green streak near his watch. "Guess it never washes off completely." She reached for his hand, wiping it with a damp towel. "You know I like it, it suits you." Before he could answer, Owen called from the hallway. "We're gonna be late." "I'm walking him today," Kiera said, grabbing her coat. "Evelyn's got a head start on the soup." Will raised an eyebrow. "You're voluntarily facing a pack of 7-year-olds at drop-off." She kissed his cheek. "I'm braver than I look." He watched them go, his son chattering beside a woman who had turned their quiet survival into something that felt like a home with heartbeat and laughter. Later that afternoon, Will stood in the backyard, attaching string lights to the wooden pergola. Kiera had offered to host the post-event volunteers' dinner, and he hadn't hesitated. Their house, their life finally felt like something worth sharing. Evelyn stepped outside with a bowl of lemons. "She's nervous," she said. Will adjusted one of the hooks. "About tonight?" "No," Evelyn said, setting the bowl down. "About everything." He looked over. "She's never had a family that wasn't built around conditions," Evelyn continued. "You and Owen, you're different, you matter more than anything she's built." Will nodded, fingers tightening slightly around the light strand. "That's the thing, though, we're not trying to take anything from her. We're just here." "And that," Evelyn said, smiling, "is exactly why she's terrified of losing you." The party in the park was a blur of laughter and music. Will manned the grill while Owen ran a 3-legged race with 2 other kids from his class. Kiera floated between conversations, easy and bright, but he noticed the way her eyes kept flicking toward him, like she was still making sure he hadn't disappeared. As the sky darkened and the last of the tables were cleared, Will found her sitting on the edge of the gazebo, heels off, feet dangling. "Hey," he said, settling beside her. "Hey," she answered softly. "You okay?" She looked out at the empty field. "I was thinking about the night you painted the nursery, how I thought I was preparing for something couldn't define." He waited. "I thought I was getting ready to be a mother," she said, "but what I really needed was to become someone who could love without fear." "You've done that," he said quietly. "You've done all of it." She turned to him. "I know we said we weren't rushing anything, that we were building slow, but Will, I don't want to wait anymore." He reached for her hand. "What are you saying?" She inhaled, steady and deep. "I want you to marry me, not someday, not when the timing feels perfect. Now, if you'll have me." He blinked, heart thudding. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her with everything he hadn't yet said. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. Yes, of course, yes. 2 weeks later, under a canopy of string lights in their own backyard, surrounded by neighbors, friends, and the sound of Evelyn humming a Sinatra tune in the kitchen, Will and Kiera said their vows. Owen stood proudly beside them, holding the ring box like it was a treasure chest. Kiera wore a simple ivory dress, bare feet in the grass, and eyes so full of conviction it took Will's breath away. "I vow to be more than safe," she said. "I vow to be home." And Will, voice thick, replied, "I promise to never let you forget what love looks like when it's real." They sealed it not with a grand flourish, but with a kiss that felt like a beginning and a memory all at once. That night, after the last of the guests had gone and Evelyn had tucked Owen into bed with a new book and a glass of water, Kiera and Will sat on the steps of the porch, wine glasses in hand. "I used to think love had to be earned," she said, "that it came with terms." "It doesn't," Will replied, brushing her hair from her face. "It just needs room to grow." She leaned into him, eyes closed, content. And in the quiet comfort of their new life, neither of them looked back again. They didn't need to. Everything they'd ever wanted was right there in each other's arms, in the sound of a child's laughter through an open window, in the home they'd built not out of wealth or design, but out of trust, truth, and the kind of love that never had to be proven again.